What's up everyone? Today we're going to use Ableton Live 12's new MIDI clip tools to do a little bit of this, and a little bit of this, and a little bit of this. So as you might know, Ableton Live 12 came out recently and some of you might still be considering upgrading. Some of you might just have upgraded and you might want to explore this feature. What I'm talking about is when you make a MIDI track and you create a MIDI clip on that MIDI track, in the bottom left side corner, nowadays you have some new tools you can use to generate and manipulate the MIDI notes. Today I want us to look at these together so you can understand if these tools are something that you can actually use. And I think that almost everyone can find something in there that they like. So let's look at it together and make some silly sounds. So there are three categories down here. There's the utilities, the transformation tools, and the generative tools. The utilities are there to manipulate the things that you've already drawn in. The transformation things are very creative ways to transform the things that you've already drawn in. And then there's the generative ones, which is where you start from a blank canvas and you want Ableton to generate something from scratch for you. All right, let's start with the utilities because they have some very universal features that I think almost everyone will find interesting. Imagine I've got a simple pattern of 16th notes and let me shorten all of the notes. I could either just drag them back a bit like this, or I could set the length here, hop, set the length here. And now one of the fun things that's here is this Humanise button, where I can now introduce a certain amount of randomness in the starting and end times of the notes. You know, and you can go really far with this, but if you are playing with a human that plays this inconsistently, you might want to fire the human and just work with computers instead. But just adding a little bit of humanization is cool. And then I would recommend going down here and looking at the velocity and set the deviation a little bit so that some of the notes are a little bit stronger than the others and that it creates a little bit of randomness in the velocity. So now we've got timing humanization and velocity humanization in a way. And remember that you can, of course, continue to create some accents in there wherever you want, but they all maintain that little bit of deviation at the bottom here so that there is a little bit of variation in the rhythm and in the velocity of each note. This is for me the most interesting way to use this tab. So you humanize a little bit and you humanize a little bit here. And I know some of you are going to love this ramp function, which kind of already existed in the previous versions, but it was less clear. Imagine I make little 30-second notes here, and then you touch either one of these ramp controls. Look at what the velocity is doing. Look at the, I know I'm moving here, but look at what this is doing, right? So look at how these move together. See what this ramp is doing? So, that's dope, no? Let's add in the loop of 2 weeks ago. Excellent. Okay, so that's the utility tab. But before we go, let's try to reverse it. I hate it. No one would ever use that. I don't fully understand why people would use invert or reverse on MIDI. I mean, I'm sure someone has a creative use for it, but it seems really weird as a thing to do. All right, let's move on. Transformation tools. There's 8 or 9 of them here, depending on how you count. And I'm not going to do them in the proper order because I'm a rebel, because I don't care, because I don't give a damn. I'm gonna go straight to my favorite, which is time warp. Time warp, what it does is it takes the start and the end of your phrase, and you can then speed it up and slow it down as things are approaching. So for example, see how this is being pushed back, the time here is being compressed or stretched? That's excellent, no? And then you can quantize it to the grid here, which creates really weird grooves. And you can add a second point in the middle, just as a way of creating pushing and pulling feelings of rhythms. It's really weird. I've never seen something quite like this before on MIDI. This is already reason enough for me to come explore this section of the toolkit because I freaking love it. I think it's cute. I think it's great. I think it's fun. Now let's look, for example, at ornament. Ornament is cute because it's got 2 different things. It's got flam and grace notes. Flam is when you take a drum and you hit with 2 hands with a microsecond of difference. It's like it still counts as 1 hit, but it's actually 2 hits and it just kind of thickens up your sound. So for example, if I wanted to add a flam to one particular note, I would just do that. You can add the velocity. And if you want to think of it less percussively and you want to think of it more harmonically, you could add something called grace notes, which is the same concept, does the same thing, but you can add multiple. Honestly, There's going to be a track in the next year and a half that uses just that idea, and it's going to be iconic because it's like, whoa, who would even do that? Well, someone who figured out to put on little grace notes onto just one hit of their little riff. It's deceptively simple, but very cute, kind of like me. I remember in my video from a few weeks ago called Stable But Not Boring, one idea that you could do here is you can change the endings of the notes. So like the length of the notes, for example, by offsetting them like this. This is just changing the ending of the notes. And that's something that as a beginner you don't really think much of. However, having the right endings of the notes really changes the groove of the thing. So make some variations. See how much that changes the groove of things? If I turn it off, it's much more like a machine gun. But as long as I turn on this span, it instantly becomes way groovier. And again, we're only talking about timings, right? We're not talking about velocities here. A very simple tool for making very repetitive things interesting. All right, we've done a lot of rhythmical ones. Let's look at some of the more harmonic ones. Let's make ourselves a little chord. So now we select everything and let's look at what we've got. Strum, it'll just offset the start and the ending of your notes like a string instrument would. That's beautiful, no? Now let's talk about the most disappointing feature in here, which is the arpeggiate function. I'm such a hater of Ableton's arpeggiate function. Oh my God. You know why? Because of the lack of dotted notes. I just can't believe that we've come to version 12 of the software and there's no dotted notes in this rate thing. Here's 16th notes, there's 8th notes, and in between there's the triplet version, but okay, apparently it's 1/12th here, but then you go to 1/16th, and very often I'm looking for a pattern that basically starts with bum, 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 which is dotted 8th notes. It's not even a simple fix like just deleting notes, because now I'm skipping steps of the scale. It's a mess. But at least something that I can do here now is I can have Ableton generate this MIDI for me, and I can delete things and move things around as necessary. So it's a starting point. I love just shortening the gate like that. So gorgeous. Now the next one that we could work on is the connect, where we simply take two notes and we connect them. And then you can tie some of them together. This instantly could work in a lot of techno genres. You don't really need much more than this. Let's just for fun time warp that again, because I'm a sucker for time warping. Very acid. I love it. And notice that I haven't had to use a single brain cell yet today. This is all generative based on some very simple inputs, right? And it does help that there's a scale snapping function here. So everything that's been generated and moved around has been within scale. So the amount of clashing notes is really minimized. The last thing that I haven't talked about is the velocity shaper, which is this kind of sort of envelope. It's like complex LFO or envelope or whatever you want to call it, that affects down here the velocity. So when I'm moving this around, it changes the velocity curve of all of these things. So it's a fun way of creating a pushing and pulling feeling at the level of the velocity, which means it's like an LFO working over that. And I really appreciate that. That's fun. Next section, generative tools. And in generative tools, there are 5 things right now that you can do. And I struggled a little bit with it at first until I realized some stuff. So let me start, for example, with the rhythm generator. Okay, we're going to generate a rhythm. And what it's got is a whole bunch of pre-programmed rhythmic patterns that you can scroll through and it will just place them on the grid for you. But this pattern is just like selecting a database that exists somewhere in the background. And so what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want a step duration of 1/16th note. And then I'm going to want 16 steps in a pattern, and then I can set the density. How many notes do I want there to be here? And so this is going to generate some nice outcomes. It's got a rhythm, it's got some velocity variations, and I can scroll through until I find something that I like. I can split some notes, I can shift some notes. This is all simple, good fun, but then very quickly you're going to be like, oh, I've triggered one thing with this pattern. How do I add more rhythms to this clip? Because this one note, one monophonic riff might get stale very quickly. Well, you just unselect, and then you choose a new pitch. For example, let's go for E, and then you select a different rhythm, and now you're going to get something like, and now let's add back in some drums. Let's make everything an octave lower. So you can see how this is quite fun and playful for generating rhythms. Obviously, drum machines would be a great place to do this as well. All right, let's use this chord kit. Let's create a 1-bar loop, and let's add in some rhythms. Hoppa! Oh look, you can even select instantly which instrument it goes for. And then you just unclick, and then you can choose a new one, conga, set a different rhythm for that one. In a similar vein, there's this Euclidean device. And Euclidean rhythms are where you take your grid, for example, in this case, 16 16th notes, and you say, I'm going to divide it by some arbitrary number. Let's say divided by 2. So we say we're going to take 2 notes and we're going to try and spread them out over the length of our time as much as possible. So in this case, 2 would look like this, or if we divide it into 4, it would look like this. But interestingly, let's say you want to divide it in 3, what you create is not triplets, you create something that is snapped to the grid. So how do we take 3 notes and divide them as much as we can over this space? Well, let's just look for it. So this would be a Euclidean rhythm where you divide it into 3. So anyway, Ableton gives you some options here to generate that. For example, I've divided by 3 and you get a very similar pattern to what I was drawing in earlier. Now, normally what you would do is you would turn on various steps and you would change the density per step. You would say, okay, I want one of my hits to be divided by 3 and one of them to be divided by 2. And what you then get is the feeling of very cool polyrhythms. Weirdly, this isn't set up like that, which I find very disappointing. However, if you know what you're looking for, because I know what I want from Euclidean patterns, but it's never good to rely on secret knowledge, right? What you want to do is you want to deselect what there is, and then you want to generate one separately. So for example, so now I'm going to add in another one. So you see how I'm able to create these polyrhythms. However, I'm not convinced by this implementation. All this does right now is be a fancy rhythm divider. I want to be able to set the density per layer, just like the original implementation of the Max for Live devices that were doing the Euclidean sequencing before. So Ableton, please take note, your arpeggiator and your Euclidean thing, I ain't a fan. However, back to the positive, some things that I am a fan of, for example, is stacks. Stacks is the chords generation device. Now, you could have just called it chords and then people would actually know what to expect when they arrive in it. And also the way that the chords are drawn, I think might relate to how they're set up on the Ableton Push. But as a pianist, this means nothing to me, right? But anyway, complain. Oscar's always complaining. Let's actually do something fun with it and let's generate a C major chord. Woohoo, we got a C major chord. In fact, I want an A minor chord, so I'm just gonna do down, down. There we go. So you got one chord here. However, one chord isn't gonna take you very far unless you're doing something super minimal. So let's make our loop 4 bars instead. Let's select our entire space and generate one chord, and now 2 chords and 4 chords. Okay, so the first chord is gonna be an A, second chord is gonna be, let's do a C, third one's gonna be an F, fourth one's gonna be an F. Oh, I guess I could change the inversion as well. Look at this, beautiful chord progression. I mean, this was really complicated to get to an output of a couple of chords. I definitely think that there's value in making it easier for people to make simple triadic chord progressions like this. But you know, I already understand how it works and I had to fight my way through the interface to apply what I wanted to have happen. So I'm not sure if this is the implementation. Like if I was teaching an absolute beginner like I do in my foundations course, would I recommend them use this or would this just further confuse them? Let's assume that like the majority of people who use this program are fairly new to this. Does this really help them? And people who are not new to it, people who actually know how to draw in chords, I'm not going to use that to create a triadic chord progression like I just did here. So who's it for? I'm not sure. But of course, remember, one of the fun things that we can do now that we've got this is we can come here and transform and we can arpeggiate the heck out of this. Let's go. Now let's do something else crazy like time warp. I feel like there might be an entirely new genre or direction of musical content that comes out thanks to this time warp. It breaks sort of the rules a bit. It really encourages you to blend your musical decisions across the 1 bar line, which I don't know, I like this. Let's go back to the generate, and what else did I not look at? We didn't look at seed or shape yet. These two things arrive at a similar outcome. What seed does is it just generates a sneeze of notes. That's what I call it technically. That's a technical term called a sneeze of notes. It's like when a piano player is playing the piano and they sneeze and they just slam their hands down. Look at this sneeze of notes. Let's set the durations to be something like 1/16 to 1/8. You could constrain the pitch so that it's actually very close to each other. You could set the velocity a lot more consistent. But what I would do if I was me, and I am me, so that's great. So what I am going to do is I'm going to make a loop 1 bar long. And I'm gonna do the techno acid thing of literally just creating some random pitches and spread them out really wild, like from all the way at the bottom to all the way at the top. Dope. I mean, there's a bit of a clash of styles here. At 115 beats per minute, this is not gonna do much. But in techno, I think this can take you pretty far. It's like a random riff generator. I don't know what else this function is for, this sneeze generator. But why not? In a similar vein, there's this shape, which looks like it might try to be an arpeggiator of some sort. Let's set the rate to 1/16. So this is creating like an upward staircase where we can tie some notes together. And we can spread them out even further. Like, I guess you can see the potential of this as another random techno riff generator. I don't know how much I would rely on this to generate musical results, but remember that you can always run this through the time warp and get something cool. Let's take this and run this through the time warp. Yeah, put some delays onto this and you can have some fun. You might have noticed that there's also these max selectors here, which means that you can dive into Max for Live and develop your own if you are nerdy enough to do that. That's freaking awesome. For most users, that's going to be one bridge too far. But it's very cool that there's space here for more Max for Live implementations, because that means that we can maybe get a fixed Euclidean and a fixed arpeggiator by someone in the community. I don't know. If you do, I will make a video about it. And then I can stop being salty about it. Anyway, long story short, these are very fun for generating interesting ideas, but you have to be comfortable with getting a little bit abstract with it. It gets a little abstract, gets a little playful. I think the humanization tools are great. I really like the rhythm generators, and then I really just love the abstract nature and messing around nature of some of them. It's going to lead you into a lot of non-musical decisions as well, so it's up to you to find the ways in which it becomes more musical. But it's very fun and a huge playground. And honestly, I can totally imagine people getting super into this. The possibilities are nearly endless. Why don't you tell me what you think about this, and if there's any cool features here that I've just glossed over? It's very possible, but that was my exploration of the Live 12 MIDI tools. Remember, if you need more of a framework for learning electronic music, go follow my Foundations course. Come show us on the Discord channel what you did with this, and until next time, stay producing, be good to each other, and take care.